We read news every day. News that's informative, but rarely encouraging. The InterMountain Christian newspaper aims to change that. They present the news you need to know, from what's going on in your community to your world, with encouraging words, motivation, and the resources you need to make positive changes in your life. What is your local government doing that you need to know about? What's happening in your community you need to be a part of? Whether it's a story from your neighborhood, a national story, or an encouraging word, you'll find biblical issues of everyday life in the InterMountain Christian newspaper. InterMountain Christian News is produced and supported by the work and donations of individuals and churches. You'll find it at churches, Christian bookstores, by subscription, and online at IMCNH07052016. To find out more about supporting this local resource, go online at IMCNews.org or call InterMountain Christian News in Boise, Idaho at 208-703-8688. The InterMountain Christian News, a voice sharing the truth on matters dear to people's hearts.
Are you tired of the secular news? Do you want a Christian view of politics? Do you want to know what is going on in your Christian community? Your wait is over. Welcome to the InterMountain Christian News Hour. Here is your host, Dr. Anthony Harper.
I'm Dr. Anthony Harper here with the InterMountain Christian News Hour, making a difference. We get out the truth, and especially the truth about Israel, what is happening to Israel. And David Bedein joins me from the Center for Near East Policy Research, Jerusalem. Mr. Bedein, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
It's great to talk with you about what the truth of what is really happening. Fill in our listeners about what's been going on with the Congress, regarding UNRWA, which stands for, I believe, the United Nations Relief Workers Agency.
No, UNRWA stands for the United Nations Relief Works Agency, established at the end of 1948. For the purpose of keeping Arabs in refugee camps in perpetuity. In other words, instead of taking them into normal homes and normal places to live, keeping them in simmering, wallowing in the disgrace of refugee camps under the premise and promise of what they call the right of return. So yes, Relief and Works Agency, giving them jobs as much as possible and giving them relief through health and welfare and things like this. However, neglecting the most important issue, which is to get these people on their own feet.
Yes, and we have a concern about U.S. tax dollars going into a UN agency that's funding this curriculum in the schools, inciting kids to violence against the Jews. I know you have evidence, but there's other people that are naysayers are saying that they would accuse us of fabricating all this.
Well, all you have to do is look at the facts. You look at our website, IsraelBehindTheNews.com, and go on the search engine for UNRWA, UNRWA, and you'll see exactly what we have there. It's quite clear. It's not something which is open to question. And the fact that there's a curriculum where the children are learning the art of what they call right of return by force of arms to kill them there in the villages that existed before 48 and have now become Israeli cities. And it's a very clear, open, we have no problem getting material from the schools and from the documents of UNRWA and the Palestinian Authority. The problem we face is that the spokesman of UNRWA, Mr. Chris Gunnis, simply lies and says that this isn't the case.
Yes, and we were in Washington, D.C. Recently. I was in March. We were at the Israel Political Action Committee as the AIPAC conference, and we were in Congress meeting with some members, and it was great to be with you there, talking about with some leaders in Congress about what they can do about this problem. So share with our listeners about,
Well, of course, the way it works is the one aspect of American democracy which works the best is what we call checks and balances, where the United States Congress, especially the two committees in Congress that oversee Middle East policy, can step in and say, excuse me, but this is right or this is not right. And in the Senate, there's the Near East Subcommittee of the Senate, chaired by Senator Jim Risch of Idaho, and in the House, There's the Foreign Affairs Committee, chaired by, actually the Middle East Subcommittee of the Foreign Affairs Committee, who's chaired by Ileana Ros-Lehtinen of Florida. And these are the people who you should be, any of your listeners who have concerns should be in touch with on a regular basis. They complain they do not get enough feedback because people basically aren't in the know. The mainstream media does not report too much of these issues, and they keep them in the dark. And that's part of the problem.
Yes, and you're aware of my time at the White House. Wanted to get a response from the White House about this issue of U.S. tax dollars going into this, and they didn't tell the truth.
Not only did they not tell the truth, they said the opposite of what was going on. It's one thing to lie a little bit. It's another thing to say the exact opposite of what's going on. They try to say that the Palestinian Authority has adopted reforms in their education, which is just false. And that's the most important thing to understand. It's just completely false, no basis in reality, and that's what we're dealing with here.
Yes.
And the fact they even try to say that there's Holocaust curriculum, which an official of the UN said doesn't exist, but they put it into a memo to make it look like it does exist. Most important thing to understand, you talk about tax dollars. 12 years, I've been working on the Harper Agency, the Center for Near East Policy Research, working with the Israel Resource News Agency, has been working on the UNRWA issue for 28 years.
Wow.
12 years ago, the budget of UNRWA was $400 million, of which the United States was giving a third. Today, 12 years later, the budget is $1.2 billion. It's tripled in size, and the U.S. government's role has also tripled to $400 million. Interesting, huh?
That's more.
And this is without supervision.
It's totally horrifying to think about what is happening with our tax dollars, so much waste. I really appreciate this great article that came out with One News Now, which is an outreach of the American Family Association entitled U.S. Funding Anti-Israel Curriculum in UN-Run Schools. And we talked about the official White House response was really a lie, that this is not what is happening at all. And so... I mean, they're painting a picture of that they've really cleaned up their act, but they have not. We've got that evidence now. There's coming up a presentation. You want to get the truth out there in Jerusalem. What would you like to talk about this?
Well, I think the most important thing is that the people listening to this program will be asking Congress to hold hearings,
right,
in which we present what goes on in the schools. We've been filming the schools. We've been filming UNRWA, and to show that the reading, writing, and retzach is the word in Hebrew for murder. That's the bottom line. Very important that people know this. People don't know, and as a result, there's a lot of fiction. I would like to be able to show the schools. I'd like to show the curriculum. Palestinian Arabs who object to not every Arab wants to be taught to murder. This is the stuff that we have to share.
So, what is there something? We've got something coming up in Jerusalem that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, on July 19th, there's going to be a briefing for U.S. and other diplomats who provide funding for UNRWA. And at that time, perhaps Dr. Harper will be there at that time, in which we will be discussing all these issues. And it's very important to, the buck stops here. Basically, issues of accountability and transparency will be brought to the fore.
Yes, I mean this has been a long battle trying to get in the truth. And when did you start? Your agency there dealing with these issues. Center for?
Well, I started, the agency started in 1987, and we began to deal with it then when there were riots in the refugee camps, and we thought that would be the best thing. But I was actually inspired by a rabbi when I was 18 years old, or 17 years old, actually, in 1967, after the Six-Day War, and a rabbi said, the refugees are our problem now. From a theological point of view, God has put them into our bailiwick. In other words, Israel is now controlling the lives of the refugees. Before 67, that wasn't the case. And we can take them out, get them out of the refugee camps and get them in decent places to live. So the reason why that shouldn't happen. What stands in the way is the United States government right now, and has consistently stood in the way.
Well, there's another issue is we are waiting. I've heard from another reporter that Senator Risch's office did in fact contact the GAO and expecting, demanding accountability. So we're really waiting on a letter, for the proof of his contact.
Well, I'm waiting. Again, I don't want to be wishful thinking. If the letter exists, I'd like to see it. If Senator Risch, in his position as the chairperson of the Near East subcommittee of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, if he has sent a letter to the GAO, that's the General Accounting Office, asking for a report about UNRWA, that would be wonderful. But I think that Idaho constituents, if they get a letter, a friend of mine who works in Congress, just retired, I said, what's the secret of your work? I said, if we get 10 reasonable letters at any time, we go into a tizzy. We get taken very, very seriously. If 10 people listening to this program were to contact Senator Jim Risch of Idaho and say, are you going to demand accountability of U.S. funds to UNRWA? I think that would influence them very much. Very reasonable, clear, individual letters. It could be sent by email. It also could be sent by hard copy.
Yes, for all those listening to this program, do contact Senator Risch's office and let your voice be heard on this issue. And so we hope that we can get clear confirmation of his actually following through.
Well, the more people who contact him, the better. Senator Jim Risch, Senator Office Building, Washington, D.C., 20515. Easiest thing in the world to do.
Oh, it is. And then we've got, according to Fox News, talk about Congress bringing up some legislation in the Congress this summer. What is the latest on that? Are you aware of that? What's happening there?
Well, the legislation is pending. And Congress is pending in Congress to tie funds to the PA and UNRWA on a change in their policy.
Okay. So, this summer is pretty intense. We've got that going on. We've got the Republican convention going on, the Democrat convention, and there's so much more regarding Hillary and Trump. On a side issue, what is your belief as far as the support for Israel? Is we're more likely to get support for Israel from Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump?
It really doesn't matter. So long as the State Department stays in its position, as long as the United States State Department is the same State Department that closed the doors to the Jews in World War II, the same State Department that tried to prevent the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, the same State Department that has done everything possible to support the Arab boycott of Israel, so long as they remain in power, the same bureaucrats, that's the problem. And I don't think that either presidential candidate would want a clean house at the State Department. Therefore, my recommendation to my friends is to look at the congressional races and to work on the congressional races, see who there is going to have. I'm recently in touch with Congressman Doug Lamborn of Colorado, who really wants to make a war with the State Department over the State Department's anti-Israel issues. I think that's most important.
Yes. Well, of course, I think there's a lot of concern about the Supreme Court. I wonder how the makeup of the Supreme Court, if it became very liberal, which a lot of people are thinking could happen with Hillary Clinton, stacking it with all the judges that would be very liberal and not really supportive of the U.S. Constitution. How that affects the issue of support of Israel. Do you see the Supreme Court being that big of an issue in issues?
I'm in Israel. I'm not there. I'm not in the United. Although I sound like I'm an American, and I am an American citizen. I, David Bedein, live in Israel, and that's where my focus is. So I can't comment on issues that are not focused in Israel.
Yes. So. We've got, like I said, a lot happening. I'm looking forward to joining you here this month in July there at the Knesset, and this is supposed to be, and this would not be a full, with the full Knesset session, but
no,
a smaller group there.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, for those that want to learn more information, you've got a great website, a lot of details.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that website address for
IsraelBehindTheNews.com.
Okay. So some other, I'm sure reports are going to be coming out shortly about these issues that we've been discussing, and very serious concerns. Just want to let everyone know that many Christian leaders that I know here in America are so supportive of Israel. They pray for Israel. Many Christian people do daily for Israel. We love Israel. We want to be supported, and we think of from the book of Genesis that there's blessings for those that bless Israel, and we want to get the truth out and support Israel whatever we can, and hopefully I will see you in the Congress when they have this legislation to come forward this summer.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got we definitely have so much happening here in America. It's pretty intense. So I wonder, what do you have the general idea for kind of get a consensus of Israeli citizens on this issue about UNRWA?
Most people in Israel don't know what's going on.
So is that because there's just too much liberal media in Israel?
No. Just people deal with the present. And I'm in Israel for 46 years. I'll be 66 this summer. And I'm intensely involved with Israel's history and the background. Most people in Israel are not involved with historical issues which are vital.
Oh, they're key issues.
Most people in Israel do not know that the Palestinian Authority has adopted a curriculum which is being used by UNRWA, which stresses the values of martyrdom, the right of jihad, the right of return by force of arms, and the liberation of all of Palestine.
There's another issue. Part of this curriculum is denying Israel's existence in the maps. One specific issue: the maps do not honor, or they don't recognize Israel. Correct in the curriculum there.
Well, that's correct. Every Israeli city becomes an Arab city according to the Palestinian Authority and UNRWA. Sure.
And so my other good friend, a reporter, Cheryl Hancock Watts, is very familiar with those maps that do not recognize Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And she supported her and her husband a lot of great news reports from Israel. And so now, what do we have else coming up? And besides getting, have this presentation to Knesset.
Well, the other issues that we need to deal with are the fact that Iran has fully equipped Lebanon with a arsenal of weapons. They say, and it's been confirmed, more than 100,000 missiles aimed at Israel. And many of them are embedded in schools and medical clinics. So that when Israel responds in a proper way, of course, many schools and medical clinics will be hit, and children, men, women, and children, schools, hospitals will be destroyed. And that is, so you can see headlines tomorrow morning: Jews kill teachers, kill students, kill patients, destroy hospitals, all that. All this is being ready.
Well, I do remember in our congressional meetings when I was there in Washington with you in March, we heard experts testify about this arsenal building much larger than before, and expected that they could release these weapons, start the bombing at any moment.
Yeah.
And that would would change the dynamic here seriously. And it was a blessing before when all these bombs. The bombing and all that happened, that a lot of them ended up out in the ocean or out in the middle of nowhere, and Israel was definitely blessed with that issue, and we're thankful for Iron Dome, a great system. But the missiles, as you mentioned before, are much smaller numbers than the one that we believe they have now. So, very serious issue. And we do want to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, for Israel. And it's quite an emotional experience, Mr. Bedein, being there in Jerusalem. The Temple Mount, what a special place. Yet, when I was there were Korans being passed out on the Temple Mount.
If it was all, I'm more concerned about rocks being thrown than Qurans being.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot more dangerous when you get hit by a rock than the Quran. Look at the Quran, but anyway, there's this. It's a very emotional issue, and a lot of people may be fearful of coming to Israel, but we want to encourage people to travel to Israel, to support Israel, not to refrain from support of Israel in any way, and to do all we can to show that support and love for Israel. And I think it'd be great if we had a lot more wonderful church people coming to Israel. It's a blessing to visit all these wonderful sites there, and it is a miracle to be there. But I know you've been there.
We've seen the miracle. The Jewish concept of miracles is when people are involved in miracles. That's why we see the Hanukkah story, the Purim story. That's why we have the blessing for the miracles on those days, because people took part in those miracles, and that's what we see unfolding above us, around us in Israel.
I think there's another one other element I wanted to discuss before we finish, and that would be this boycott issue.
The boycott issue is basically a way to the Arab boycott issue, which has been around since 1950, and now it's dressed up as what's called BDS. Is not only a boycott. It's a way to basically destabilize Israel and to again another way to demonize it and to create more enemies of Israel, and that's what they're doing.
Yes, it actually hurts the Arabs when they boycott, because there are Arab workers in the factories in Israel.
Sure. Well, the PLO, which the PLO, also known as the Palestinian Authority, which initiated the boycott, they don't care about the Palestinian Arab people. They care about their terrorist organization.
Yes. I have been over there, Mr. Bedein, over the Palestinian headquarters, and in Ramallah, when President Obama was there with Abbas, and what a strange experience there for me. There we see President Obama saying, "We have your back. We will support you." And then on the other side, in the Prime Minister's residence, is saying to the Prime Minister and others, "We have your back." So overall, what would you say has kind of a response from Israeli citizens to the support of the current administration we have in the U.S. compared to the previous administrations?
Well, there's unfortunately, a consistent attitude by U.S. presidents to stomp on Israel and to try to create a PLO state whose purpose is to destroy Israel and to paint it and to make it look like something which is other than what it is. When Reagan recognized the PLO in December '88, what was behind it was Saudi economic interests who were pushing Israel, pushing the United States. That's what I learned from Alan Keyes, a close advisor to President Reagan. And basically, American presidents are not on our side, not on the side of Israel.
Very, very upsetting. So I hope that we get some good leaders here that will be more supportive of Israel. And so we have more to talk about. I'm looking forward to have you back on our broadcast again, and of course seeing you in Jerusalem here shortly. Thank you for joining me today, Mr. Bedein. And if any people have any questions, they can just check out your website. And you have so much information, so much evidence there. So may God protect you all, you and your family. And
thank you. From the Holy Land of Israel, I'm pleased to speak to a religious person who believes in God's choice of the Jewish people and God's blessings over the land of Israel.
Oh, thank you for joining me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.
We read news every day. News that's informative, but rarely encouraging. The InterMountain Christian newspaper aims to change that. They present the news you need to know, from what's going on in your community to your world, with encouraging words, motivation, and the resources you need to make positive changes in your life. What is your local government doing that you need to know about? What's happening in your community you need to be a part of? Whether it's a story from your neighborhood, a national story, or an encouraging word, you'll find biblical issues of everyday life in the InterMountain Christian newspaper. Intermountain Christian News is produced and supported by the work and donations of individuals and churches. You'll find it at churches, Christian bookstores, by subscription, and online at imcnews.org. To find out more about supporting this local resource, go online at imcnews.org or call Intermountain Christian News in Boise, Idaho at 208-703-8688. The Intermountain Christian News, a voice sharing the truth on matters dear to people's hearts.